There is a very profitable, a really dangerous lie being sold to the public right now.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Right. It's this pervasive idea that your survival, like your safety in a chaotic world, it all basically boils down to the gear you buy.
Yeah, the illusion of safety through purchasing power.
Exactly. We see it all over the internet. The marketing just promises you that if you buy this carbon fiber tactical wallet or this advanced camera system or, I don't know, a specific heavy-duty flashlight, you're suddenly prepared for anything the world throws at you.
It's a brilliant marketing strategy. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But as a survival strategy, it's terrible. I mean, buying all of that equipment isn't survival. It's just shopping.
Yes, it's just shopping. And that is exactly the problem. So looking at our sources today, specifically a masterclass in urban survival and social intelligence from V.A.L.O. written by V.A.L.O, we are taking a completely different approach.
A much needed one, honestly.
For sure. Because today, we are going on a mission specifically for you, the listener. In this deep dive, we're going to unpack a comprehensive framework called V.A.L.O.R.
Right, V.A.L.O.R.
Yeah. It's a step-by-step progression designed to completely transform you from, a passive bystander into a professional observer. Because real urban survival doesn't start when glass breaks or a situation goes critical. It starts with reading the room way before a bad decision or an ambush, if ever even occurs.
Achieving that, though, it requires a fundamental and honestly almost uncomfortable shift in how you view your daily life.
Like a total mindset reset.
Exactly. We have to look at the massive contrast between the amateur mindset and the professional mindset.
Oh.
I mean, the amateur is constantly walking around asking themselves this hypothetical, anxiety-driven question like, what would I do if an emergency happens right now?
Just constantly waiting for the shoe to drop.
Right.
Yeah.
They're passively waiting for a threat to become painfully, undeniably obvious before they even engage their brain.
Yeah.
But the professional observer operates on a totally different frequency.
They ask a better question.
They do. They ask a real-time grounding question. What is already happening around me right now that I shouldn't ignore?
I love a good analogy. And living like the amateur is basically like going out and spending thousands of dollars on the absolute top-of-the-line fire extinguisher. You bring it home, and then you intentionally unplug every single smoke alarm in your house.
That is exactly what it's like.
The smoke alarm in real life is your ability to spot those early warning signs. We need to prioritize early prevention way, way over emergency response. So let's plug those alarms back in.
Let's do it.
Let's build this progression from the ground up, starting with how we visually process the world. So the first letter of the V.A.L.O.R. acronym establishes our baseline. The V stands for view the whole environment.
Which sounds simple, but think about how often we enter spaces purely as passengers in our own lives.
Oh, all the time.
Right. We walk through doors staring at our shoes or like mentally rehearsing a conversation we're going to have in 20 minutes. Viewing the environment means you deliberately strip away that passenger mindset.
You have to be present.
You do. When you cross a threshold into a new room, you need to actively scan the architecture and the people. You're looking for things like, where are the primary and secondary exits? Are there physical barriers trapping you in a corner?
Where are the blind spots?
Exactly. And crucially, you have to notice the movement of the crowd. Like, who is entirely stationary in a space designed for movement? Who's intensely watching a situation instead of actually participating in what's going on?
And the real challenge is doing all of this without looking like some paranoid secret agent scanning the perimeter. Right?
Yeah, you don't want to look like you're clearing a room like a SWAT team.
Right. But the reason this deliberate scanning is so critical ties back to a really fascinating psychological phenomenon called inattentional blindness. Because having your eyes wide open does not mean your brain is actually rendering reality.
It really doesn't.
Our sources highlight that famous Simons and Chabris psychological study, the Gorillas in Our Midst experiment. I mean, if you haven't seen the video of this, it will completely shatter your confidence in human perception.
Oh, it really does.
Yeah.
The setup of that experiment is just brilliant. So researchers ask participants to watch a video of two teams. One is in white shirts, one in black shirts, and they're passing a basketball back and forth.
Okay.
The participants are given one simple task. Just count exactly how many times the team in white passes the ball.
Which, takes a lot of intense focus. People are tracking the ball, tracking the white shirts, counting in their heads. And while this is happening, right in the exact middle of the video, a person in a full head-to-toe gorilla suit walks straight through the middle of the players.
They literally stop, thump their chest, and walk off screen.
Yeah. The gorilla is on screen for nearly 10 full seconds, And roughly half of the people watching the video never even see it.
Half of them. It's wild. And the reason is because human attention is a zero-sum game.
Right.
The mechanism at play here is cognitive load. When your attention is fully hijacked by a specific, demanding task like counting basketball passes or, staring down at a glowing smartphone screen to read an email, your visual cortex simply drops anomalous data.
It just deletes the gorilla.
It decides the gorilla isn't relevant to the task, so it doesn't even send the image to your conscious brain. If you are staring at a screen while walking through a public space, your situational awareness hasn't just decreased, it has essentially collapsed.
That's terrifying. Think about how this applies to something mundane, like a parking lot. A parking lot is the ultimate transitional space. It's basically a concrete box packed with moving machinery and deeply distracted people.
Very dangerous
Yeah,
combination.
people are looking down, their hands are full of keys and bags, their minds are entirely focused on getting from point A to point B. So applying the V here means before you even open your car door to exit your vehicle, you have to break the inattentional blindness.
You sit there for a second.
Yeah, you sit there for 3 seconds and you literally view the environment. You ask yourself, who shifted their direction of travel the exact moment I pulled into this spot? Is there someone sitting in a running car 2 spaces over, just idling without a destination?
Paying attention to those anomalies.
But I do have to push back here for a second because this is where the mental friction happens for a lot of people. If I am scanning every single parking lot and mapping exits at every grocery store, just constantly looking for threats, doesn't that mean I'm just living my life in a state of constant, exhausting paranoia?
That reaction is incredibly common. We hear it all the time.
Yeah.
And it brings us perfectly to the A in V.A.L.O.R. Assess the emotional climate.
Okay, lay it on me.
We have to draw a massive, definitive line between paranoia and awareness.
Wait.
They are not the same thing. Paranoia is an emotional fantasy.
An emotional fantasy?
Yeah, it is an internal narrative driven by fear that just assumes the worst. It's a mindset that says, everyone who looks different than me is a threat. Or, I have a sudden feeling of anxiety, so I must be in danger. Awareness is entirely different. Awareness is an objective data collection process. You are assessing the emotional climate based on observable facts and context, not your internal fear.
Because context is what actually determines risk.
Precisely. Every environment has an emotional temperature. A grocery store parking lot at noon on a Tuesday has a completely different emotional climate than that exact same parking lot at 2 in the morning on a Sunday.
Right, totally different vibe.
Exactly. A quiet, brightly lit restaurant is not the same room as a loud, overcrowded, dimly lit bar. Assessing the emotional climate simply means establishing that baseline so your brain can actually recognize when a piece of data is out of place.
So you aren't looking for danger, you are looking for deviations from the baseline.
Bingo.
Which tells us that visual observation is really only your first line of defense. The problem is, visual cues alone can be manipulated, right? Like a threat might dress exceptionally well. They might smile at you. They might look entirely, completely normal at first glance.
Oh, absolutely. Predators rely on that.
Right. If sight can be tricked, we have to rely on a sense that is much harder to fake. And that leads us to the next phase of the framework, decoding group dynamics. So the L in V.A.L.O.R stands for listen for tone, silence, and repetition.
This is huge. In a survival context, active listening sheds its reputation as just some, polite conversation habit and becomes a professional cognitive skill.
Right. It's not just nodding and saying, uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was a really comprehensive medical review published in the NCBI StatPearls database that analyzed active listening, and it requires serious, disciplined attention. But the survival application is unique here. You aren't just listening to the actual words being spoken.
Because words can lie.
Words are often a deliberate smokescreen. You are listening to detect changes in the underlying current.
Right. Tone often betrays what the words are desperately trying to hide. Like you want to listen for that forced, overly loud laughter. You want to pick up on suddenly clipped short answers or a voice cadence that's getting faster and higher in pitch because someone's adrenaline is starting to spike. And sometimes, the most deafening warning bell is a sudden, unnatural silence that falls over a group when you walk near them.
That sudden drop in volume is a massive deviation from the baseline. And that flows seamlessly into the O, orienting to power and movement.
Orienting.
Yeah. People often really misunderstand power. In a room, the real power is rarely held by the loudest person or the guy with the biggest biceps or even the person wearing the official manager's badge.
Right. I always picture this like watching a complex puppet show. The amateur observer is just staring directly at the loudest, most colorful puppet jumping around on stage, completely mesmerized by the noise.
Just distracted by the show.
Exactly, but the professional observer, they are looking past the stage. They are looking into the shadows to see who is actually pulling the strings, like who is quietly directing the group's attention, who is everyone else subtly glancing at before they decide to speak. That is orienting to power.
I love that analogy. Security professionals and tactical instructors rely heavily on this exact step to manage group dynamics.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, like in a high-stakes training environment, a seasoned instructor isn't just watching the drills. They read the room to spot the real power centers. They identify who is secretly hiding a mistake out of pride, or who is physically unsafe but just trying to blend in, or who is performing for the crowd rather than actually learning the material.
Interesting.
And we see this mirrored in corporate research, too. Harvard Business Review studies on social intelligence demonstrate that real influence and leadership doesn't stem from a title. True power comes from empathy, attunement, and deeply understanding the social climate of a group. Once you understand who actually holds the influence, you can predict what the group is going to do next.
Wow. Okay, so gathering all of this intelligence viewing, assessing, listening, and orienting, that brings us to a critical pivot point. Because sensing the power dynamic means absolutely nothing if you freeze.
Right.
Observation without action is just an interactive form of entertainment. You can read a room with perfect clarity, but if you don't do anything with that intelligence, the framework fails. And this is the R in V.A.L.O.R. Respond with purpose.
Responding with purpose means making a concrete, decisive choice based on the data you've gathered. Sometimes that choice is just micro-adjusting your own behavior.
Like what?
Maybe you deliberately lower your own tone of voice to de-escalate a rising tension. Or maybe you shift your physical position to create a barrier between you and a potential issue. But honestly, often, the absolute strongest, most tactically sound move you can make is to simply leave.
Just get out of there.
Leaving early is a masterclass in survival.
And this is exactly where human ego destroys situational awareness. The sources highlight these incredibly common ego-driven traps that keep people locked in dangerous rooms.
Ego is the enemy of survival.
Truly, like performing fake toughness is a huge one. Feeling this overwhelming need to aggressively stare someone down just because they looked at you the wrong way, or ignoring a perfectly viable exit because you don't want to look scared in front of your friends, or staying in a completely pointless verbal altercation with a total stranger just to prove you are factually correct.
It's so common. And one of the most insidious ego traps is actually the polar opposite of aggressive posturing. It is letting social politeness override your physical safety.
Oh, man. Yes.
Right. Since childhood, we are conditioned to be accommodating, to answer questions when asked, and to avoid causing a scene at all costs. And threats rely on this conditioning.
They exploit it.
Completely. It's answering a stranger's highly probing, inappropriate questions in a dark parking lot just because you are terrified of seeming rude or standoffish. Being polite is a virtue, but being socially obedient to danger is a massive liability.
I think we need to apply this to a real-world scenario to really see the mechanics in action. So imagine you are at a restaurant with your family, eating dinner in a corner booth. Suddenly, a really loud, aggressive argument breaks out near the bar area. The amateur bystander immediately falls into the trap of tunnel vision.
Right, the gorilla effect again.
Yes. They just sit there, staring at the conflict, entirely absorbed by the spectacle.
Which is exactly how bystanders accidentally transition into participants or victims.
Yeah.
They stop viewing the whole environment.
Exactly. But the professional observer, having already mapped the exits when they walked in, immediately responds with purpose. They don't just stare at the loudest puppet, they actively assess the mechanics of the conflict.
They're gathering data.
Right. They ask, are the arguing individual's hands visible, or are they hidden in pockets? Is heavy alcohol consumption fueling this? Are other people in the restaurant standing up to join the fray? Is the physical momentum of this argument shifting toward our trapped booth in the corner?
All critical questions.
And if that cluster of answers points to danger, the professional leaves early. You stand up, you guide your family out the secondary exit, and you call the restaurant to pay the bill later.
You don't wait for permission.
No. But
Yeah.
here is a question that always comes up, and it's a mental hurdle for a lot of people. Isn't leaving early, especially before a physical fight even actually breaks out, aren't you just letting the bad guys win? Doesn't retreating embolden aggressive behavior?
I hear that all the time. And that objection is pure ego talking.
Really?
Yes. If we connect this to the broader philosophy of urban survival, You have to clearly define what winning actually means. I mean, your mission is not to win a screaming match in Applebee's.
Right.
Your mission is not to teach a hostile stranger a valuable lesson about public manners. Your mission is to go home safely to your life, completely unharmed, period. Ego is a blinding force that keeps people planted inside bad rooms for far longer than logic dictates.
That is a hard truth, but an absolutely necessary one. All right, so we've established how to act, but let's rewind the timeline a bit. Before you even get to the point where you need to execute an exit strategy, how do you actually tell the difference between normal, everyday weird behavior and genuinely suspicious activity?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. What are the specific early warning signs of an escalating situation?
This requires looking at established pre-incident indicators. Threat assessment experts, along with public health data from organizations like NIOSH and the CDC that study workplace violence, they have extensively mapped the behavioral cues that reliably precede physical escalation.
So there is a science to it.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about visible physiological shifts. Clenched fists, heavy, rapid breathing, pacing back and forth, or a fixed, unblinking stare that just tracks a specific target.
And it really helps to understand the mechanism behind those physical signs, too. When someone is gearing up for violence, their body initiates a massive adrenaline dump. The nervous system prepares for fight or flight, which means blood is rushed to major muscle groups, hence the clenched fists and the pacing to burn off that energy.
Exactly. The body is literally changing gears.
And it also causes a loss of fine motor skills and often triggers tunnel vision, which explains that fixed stare. They aren't just acting angry, their biology is physically shifting.
And that physiological shift is undeniable once you know what to look for. But, the most vital indicators are often much more subtle than overt aggression. We are really looking for sudden changes in a baseline.
Like what?
Like a highly talkative, boisterous individual who suddenly goes dead silent the second you approach their space. That abrupt change demands your attention. Another major red flag is incongruent behavior.
Incongruent behavior, meaning it doesn't fit the setting.
Exactly. Behavior that fundamentally doesn't match the environment or the social contract of the space.
Right, like the classic gas station scenario our sources brought up. Someone is loitering by the pumps for 20 minutes. They don't have a vehicle. They aren't pumping gas. And instead of looking at the pumps or the storefront, they are intensely watching the customers coming and going.
Highly incongruent.
Yeah, that behavior is totally incongruent with the purpose of a gas station. Another indicator is target glancing, repeatedly looking at your bag, checking where the exits are, or constantly mapping the location of a security camera.
Always a bad sign.
And then there is boundary testing. This is a big one. This is when a stranger approaches you, you give a clear, polite no, and instead of accepting that boundary, they ignore it and take a physical step closer to you to keep pushing the interaction.
That is a massive red flag.
But let me play devil's advocate for just a second here. What if someone is standing near you with their arms tightly crossed and a fixed stare, but it turns out the air conditioning is just absolutely cranking and they are freezing, and they're staring because they're completely zoned out thinking about their grocery list?
It happens.
How do we avoid jumping to crazy conclusions and panicking over innocent behavior?
That exact scenario is why security professionals rely on the cluster rule. This is arguably the most vital concept in threat assessment.
The cluster rule.
Yes, one single cue like crossed arms or a sigh is just raw information. It means nothing on its own. It could totally be the air conditioning. But a cluster of cues crossed arms, combined with target glancing at your pockets, combined with pacing, combined with ignoring your personal space, that cluster is a confirmed warning.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. And this logic forms the backbone of a fascinating strategy used in infrastructure security called the OHNO approach, right?
Yes, so CISA.
Right. It stands for observe, initiate a hello, navigate the risk, and obtain help. The initiate a hello part sounds incredibly counterintuitive if you were trying to avoid danger, but the mechanism behind it is brilliant. When you observe a cluster of suspicious behavior, offering a polite, casual hello or asking, "Can I help you find something?" acts as a tactical test.
It really does. It forces a cognitive reset. Because if a person is innocently lost or confused, they will welcome the help.
Right. Oh, thank you. Where is the restroom?
Exactly. But if they are engaged in hostile surveillance or preparing for an ambush, your hello ruins their anonymity. It tells them, "I see you. You are no longer invisible to me." Often, that simple acknowledgement is enough to make a predator abandon their plan and leave the area. Professionals evaluate behavior and context together. They don't overinterpret one single cue and panic.
Man, We have this incredibly robust framework now. V.A.L.O.R. view, assess, listen, orient, respond. We know the physiological indicators. But learning this in theory is very different from execution. How does this actually become a reality for you, the listener? Let's break down the daily routine of a professional observer.
The foundational truth here is that situational awareness is not an automatic human setting. It is a perishable cognitive skill. If you don't use it, you lose it.
So you have to practice.
Daily, the routine requires you to actively, consciously practice these observation skills in completely low-stakes environments. When you walk into your local boring coffee shop tomorrow morning, don't just stare at the menu. Take 3 deliberate seconds to read the crowd density. Locate the secondary exit in the back. Listen to the general hum of the room to establish the baseline tone.
Just make it a habit.
Exactly. Make this a mundane habit so that when the stakes are high, the software is already running in your brain.
And the sources emphasize that reading the room isn't just about projecting your attention outward, right? The most crucial part of this daily routine is actually turning that observation inward and reading your own nervous system.
Oh, 100%. The phrase used in the text is, calm is a weapon. If you walk into a room and you are already furious about the traffic you just sat in, or you are desperate to prove your authority to a coworker, or your heart is racing from too much caffeine, your internal baseline is entirely compromised.
You're projecting your own noise onto the room.
Yes, you will misread the external environment, you will perceive disrespect where there is only neutrality, or your internal noise will completely mask the subtle signs of an actual threat.
So you have to actively manage your physiology. You do a quick internal audit, like, is my jaw clenched? Is my breathing shallow? And if it is, you utilize tactical breathing, inhaling deeply to push oxygen into the blood and physically force your heart rate down. You ground yourself before you attempt to assess the world around you.
It all comes back to the ultimate contrast we've been building toward today. The amateur outsources their awareness.
Right.
They tell themselves, well, if the deadbolt is locked, or there's a high-definition security camera pointing at the door, or I bought all the tactical gear the internet told me to buy, so I'm safe. They outsource their survival to inanimate objects.
They bought the illusion.
Exactly. But the professional knows that a tool is entirely useless without intentional attention, emotional regulation, and disciplined continuous scanning.
So what is the ultimate takeaway for now? Time is survival currency. That is the bottom line. Reading the room gives you time, and having time gives you options. The goal of unpacking this V.A.L.O.R framework isn't to make you walk through life in a state of exhaustion and fear. It is the exact opposite.
Step freedom.
Yes, it is to empower you to recognize reality, trust your instincts, and refuse to be socially obedient to danger.
I love that. And as you take this framework out into the world, I want you to consider a final thought that bridges everything we've discussed today. We've focused entirely on physical spaces, parking lots, restaurants, offices. But think about the concept of inattentional blindness we discussed earlier with the gorilla experiment.
Right.
Now, apply that mechanism to your digital life. Algorithms and social media feeds are engineered with billions of dollars specifically to create that exact gorilla effect. They are designed to hyper-focus your attention, trigger your adrenaline, and hijack your emotional baseline before you even step foot outside your front door.
Wow, that's profound.
Ask yourself, are you letting a glowing screen artificially alter your internal emotional climate, turning you into an anxious amateur before you even have a chance to read the real room?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. Make sure that person isn't you. Keep your head up, master your own baseline, and start reading the room before it reads you.